Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for May 2018. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator, and this month we're going to be going over how to use the new Auto-Trapunto tools that we got in the latest new release of Total Quilter. So if you're not familiar with what Trapunto looks like, this is a picture of a quilt block we did as part of our first quilt project series. This one was done back in May of 2015, and we're going to recreate this block using the new tools. So this is a picture of what it looks like, and to make sure we all understand what Trapunto is and the way we do it the Floriani way, that's what we're going to cover next. So if you're not familiar with what Trapunto is, as you can see in this picture, parts of this quilt block have a raised, puffy appearance, and the rest of the quilt block is kind of matted down with the quilting or texture fill stitches, and that's what Trapunto is. So that's the Trapunto effect, having this nice raised area. So traditionally Trapunto was done by getting that raised area by cutting a slit in the backing fabric and then stuffing in some extra batting and then sewing up the slit. And we just decided that that was too messy and we didn't like hand sewing, so we came up with an easier way to do it. And we call it Trapunto the Floriani way. Basically, you hoop up a piece of heat-resistant batting and stitch a placement line, place some meltable batting over the line, melt and burn away the batting with our Heatcraft tool, place your top fabric in the hoop and tack it down, and then finish up the stitching to create the Trapunto effect. So in the next slides, we're going to go over this step by step with pictures so you get a good idea what we're talking about. So the first step would be to load the Trapunto design into your machine, hoop up a piece of Floriani quilted soft cotton bamboo batting, and it's important that you don't substitute this with just any old batting. It must be heat resistant. If you don't have the quilted soft cotton bamboo batting, R&K embroidery batting will also work. And then some designs, especially the ones you're going to create with the Auto-Trapunto tools, will also create a placement line which would be stitched at this point. The next step would be to center up to 3 pieces of Floriani quilted soft polyester batting in the hoop, covering any placement lines. But again, it's important not to substitute any old batting here. It must be polyester, the kind that's easily melted away. And then you want to cover with a piece of water-soluble topping and secure it nice and tight with embroidery perfection tape. And the reason for the topping is just to hold all the batting down. Next, you would attach the hoop to your machine and stitch out any tack down stitches. Next, you would remove the hoop from the machine and tear away the topping. Next, you'll want to plug in your Floriani Heatcraft tool and let it warm up. And you want the fine curved point tip on it. You want to be careful because the tool gets very hot. Next, you'll want to gently lift the poly batting and then melt it away from the stitch lines, outside and also inside if applicable. Because we used cotton bamboo batting as the base, it will not melt, just the top batting. When the tool is hot, it glides through the batting like butter, so if you start to feel it tug, stop and let the tool reheat for about 30 seconds and then it should work fine again. Once you've melted away the batting, it ought to look like this. And notice that you used polyester thread, it may also melt some of the stitches. Normally you don't need to worry about this because they'll be hidden underneath the fabric, but if it bothers you, then use rayon or cotton thread. Next, you're going to center your top fabric on the design and secure the edges with embroidery perfection tape. Make sure that that tape is well outside the stitch field. You do not want to stitch through it. And note that we used an awful lot of tape here due to the bulk of the design, and you want it to be held down nice and tight so it goes under the needle nice and easily. So the last step would be to reattach your hoop to the machine, stitch out the remaining quilting and the Trapunto stitches. And just a note, you may want to use the same color thread in the bobbin as in the top, because unless your tension is well balanced, you may see some bobbin thread come up on the top. So now that you have a good idea of what Trapunto looks like and how we do it the Floriani way, we can go ahead and get started by showing you how to use the new tools. Before I get into that, what you'll want to do is you'll want to click the new icon here to get a new page. And let's get our grid set up correctly. Actually, what you set it to really doesn't matter, but if you want to set it to look like mine, what you'll want to do is come up to the ruler here, and you'll want to right click on the ruler bar, and just to set the stage here, if I want you to left click, I will just say click. If I want you to do a right click on your mouse, so that's the right mouse button, I will specifically say right click. So you're going to hover over the top ruler bar, right click, you'll get this little menu. You'll want show grid to be checked. I'm in inches, and you'll want to come down here to grid settings and click that. And I have my grid spacing set to 1/4 of an inch, and I have my grid major set to 8. So the grid major are these purple lines here, and that means that every 8 of these I will get a bigger, fatter line for reference. And so what that means is every 2 inches I'll get one of these lines. So again, what you have it set to for this particular lesson today really doesn't matter. Now normally I have you come down and set your thread palette to something small, and I've got the full Floriani palette showing here. So let's set it to something with fewer colors. Let's come in here and click our select thread chart, and what we'll want to do is select Floriani cotton. And that's not because I want you to actually stitch with this thread. It's because it just has fewer selections down here to choose from, so it makes it a little bit easier to choose colors. Again, the colors we're going to choose today aren't going to be that important either, because we're not actually making a finished product. We're just kind of showing you how the tools work. So before I get into the new Auto-Trapunto tools, let's take a look at a couple of other new things that showed up in the latest release, and that's these 3 icons right here. You've got a Facebook, a Twitter, and a Pinterest icon, and if you get these set up, when you click on them, they'll go to your appropriate social media account, take a picture of what you're working on, and allow you to post it directly there so people can see what you're working on. So that's kind of cool if you're into showing your work progress on social media. And the 2 new tools that we're going to talk about today are Trapunto tools. They're located right here just to the left of those tools. They're not lit up right now because we don't have anything selected for them to work on. So this tool right here is our Auto Standard Trapunto tool, and this is our Auto Quilt Block Trapunto tool. So we'll be talking about both of those. But in order to make either of these work, we need a piece of artwork for them to work on. And we're going to start with this tool right here, which is our Auto Quilt Block Trapunto tool. It's probably going to be the one you use most often because it creates a total quilt block for you all automatically using that Trapunto effect. And this one you'll use when you want to do something more custom. But let's just start with a design. Now you can start with a piece of artwork like are located here in our custom shapes library, but we're going to recreate the design that I showed you in the pictures that was from May 2015. So to do that, we're going to have to start with the feather design that we used in that design, and it is right here in the embellishments. So I'm going to click that, and it's here in your feathers folder. If you don't see the feathers folder, click the drop down and select feathers, and you'll see something that looks like this. The design that was in there was this one right here, and it was the feathers block right here, and we are going to get that centered up. So the first thing we're going to do is come right here to this icon, our align tool, and click it. And right now there's only 2 different icons that are selected. This one here is the one we want, center to rulers. So that's going to put it right in the center of our design window. The next thing we want to do is we want to get this sized to the final size that we want to use it at, and that's going to be 5 1/4 inches. So we're going to come over here to our Properties box, scroll along the top tabs to our Transform tab, and we're going to make sure that Maintain Aspect Ratio is checked, that we are in inches mode, and in here we're going to type in 5.25 into the width, and that'll automatically, as you see, change the height. Then we're going to click Apply, and now that makes it just a little bit bigger. Now we've got all the objects here selected, and these embellishments consist of two different objects. They consist of the stitches of the feather, which are here, which we're going to use, and there also is an artwork outline. And artwork are just lines that don't stitch, but that's what we need to make the Auto-Trapunto tools work correctly. But what if the thing you want to create a trapunto around doesn't have an outline built in, which will be the case for most of the things that you want to create a trapunto around. So let's just assume this doesn't have one. So I'm going to actually come here and select that artwork, which is right here, and I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to do that by pressing the delete key on my keyboard. I apologize that you can't see me doing that, but here is my run stitch, and I'm going to come up here to my Create Outlines tool, and I'm going to click it, and it's going to allow me to create an outline. What you want to do is have your ripples set to 1, your spacing set somewhere pretty tight. You can come all the way into 0, but you probably want it offset just a little bit. I've got 0.1 in here right now. Let's make it a little bit closer. Let's do 0.05. And I'm going to make sure that I'm in cascade mode, not spiral. And I don't want join repeats or remove selection checked. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that is going to put in a little artwork outline just about where it was. So I've just, redone what was already there for me, but this was illustrative to show you how you would do it if it didn't already exist. And so now what I've got, if I go ahead and expand my sequence view, is my run stitch feathers and my artwork outline. And just to let you know, if you want to do this to create that artwork outline, it's important that what you bring in is a stitch object. So a run stitch is a stitch object. It can't be just stitches. So when you open up a file, and I'll just pretend to open a file here by clicking up Open Design, it's important that you check this box right here, Convert to Outlines. If you don't do that, and you're loading in anything other than a WAF or a C2S file, what's going to happen is that it'll come in as stitches, which is kind of the normal way we load something in because you have better integrity that way of the stitches that come in. But it's important in order to create an outline that we have converted it to an outline so it knows how to create an extra outline, if you will. So make sure this is checked if you need to create your own outlines. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this because I really don't want to open anything. And the next thing I want to do is select just the artwork, and then if you'll notice up here my Trapunto tools are lit up. So I've got my Auto Standard Trapunto tool and my Auto Quilt Block Trapunto tool, and that's the one we're going to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you're going to get a little dialog here showing me my selection size is about 5.27 inches, and it's going to select an automatic block size for me based on this size, so it gives you some margin around it. But this is not what I want. What I want to have is a 6-inch block size. So what I'm going to do is come in here and change this to 6 by deleting the 0.84 after. Make sure you do it on both sides because this is not proportional. This allows you to make a rectangular block if you want to. And I'm then going to go ahead and click OK. And when I do that, the magic is going to happen. It's going to create some stitches around the edge for me, and it's also going to automatically put in a stippling design and then kind of a border stitch design out here for me. So let's take a closer look at the stitches that have been created for us. And I'm going to double click my magnifying glass to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. So I'm going to double click it, and that's a shortcut for zoom to fit. So that makes everything nice and big on the screen. And I'm going to click off of it so that you can see everything is not selected. And to see what the stitches are, I'm going to use this tool right here. This is our slow redraw tool, and I'm going to drag the slider along so we can see the stitch sequence as it's stitching. So that first piece that you saw there, that's the artwork. It doesn't stitch, so it just came out. So the first thing that is going to get stitched is our actual run stitch design. Now we're going to move that to the end, but you see the next thing that stitches is the outline around it. So that's actually going to be the placement line showing us where to put down our secondary pieces of batting. Then we'll come down a tack down line right over the top of that to tack that batting down, and then it's going to draw a square around the outside to give us a nice border. It's going to draw another line of stitching around the inside again to give us a nice border, and then it's going to create our stipple design around the outside to create the trapunto effect. So those are the stitches that get created with the Auto-Trapunto block tool. So before we go on from here, let me just let you know that even though it created a stippling design in here, we can come in later and change it, and we're actually going to do that, but we'll do that a bit later, because what I want to talk about is the regular auto stipple tool, not the block tool, and how that works. And we're going to use that to put that heart, if you'll remember, was in the original design, here into the center. So to talk about the regular auto stipple tool, let's get a new design window so we're not distracted by this, and I'm going to do that by clicking on New. Now this is just for illustration. If you want to follow along, you can, but you can just watch this. I'm going to get my custom shapes tool, and we're going to find a heart, because that was what was in that original design, and I'm going to use Heart 03. And I'm not going to resize it right now or do anything to it. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. We'll resize it when we get back to our quilt block. But this is, again, just for illustration to see what the standard Auto-Trapunto tool does. So I'm going to click it with my artwork selected, and then I'm going to actually delete the original heart so we're not distracted by it. I'll turn on 3D, and I will double click my magnifying glass so that we can be all nice and zoomed in, and then again I will slow redraw so you can see what happens. So it's going to actually draw that placement line again, and then it's going to draw in a new color. It's going to come in and do the tack down line for the secondary piece of batting, and then it's going to put in a tack down line for the fabric. So it's a little bit different that it didn't create all of the lines that I had in the other tool. So I'm actually going to have to create some of those manually, but that's pretty easy to do. Now, you may or may not want to stitch this extra tack down line out here. It's a little bit far away. It's about 1/4 of an inch away from our actual trapunto design. So you can either, again, delete this or you can leave it. But a lot of times it's nice to have it to have a little bit extra hold to hold that fabric down around the trapunto design. So now that you understand what that does, let's go back to our other design, and let's go ahead and bring in that heart one more time. So I'm going to come in here to my custom shapes, and I'm going to again scroll down, and I'm using the scroll wheel on my mouse to find that heart, and it's obviously too big to fit in the center of our circle here. So I'm going to just hover over the resizing handle, click and drag it down to a different size. I could do it manually over here by typing in numbers, but I'm just going to do it visually. And then again, visually, I'm just going to kind of line it up in the center there. Again, I'm doing that visually because the actual center of the heart is down here, and it's not quite in the real center, so I'm going to just visually center it up there. And since this is already artwork, we don't actually need to create an outline around it because we're just starting out with artwork. But what we want is we want to create a set of stitches around it to actually outline the heart. And that's going to be a run stitch. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is create that run stitch. So I'm going to come down here to my run stitch icon, and I'm going to click it. and that's going to give me a run stitch around there. It's going to put it in charcoal. We'll go ahead and leave it in that color. And now what I need to do is I need to create a boundary around the outside of the heart and to the inside of this circle, so my trapunto stitches, my stippling stitches, or my texture pattern, whatever I'm going to use, can start at the inside of the heart and go to the outside of something. Otherwise it would just continue on forever, and that just won't work. So what I'm going to do before I do anything else is create that boundary, and we're going to create a circle. To do that, I'm going to come here to my ellipse tool, and I'm going to click it, and I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, and you can't see me doing that, but I'm going to come up in here somewhere, hold down Control on the keyboard, drag my mouse down to the bottom right. It doesn't matter how far or what size circle, but holding down Control makes it a perfect circle. It's important now to let off the mouse and then let off Control. If you do it backwards, it'll be an ellipse, and we want it to be a perfect circle. We're going to come over here to our Transform tab, and now we're going to set it to the proper size, and that will be 2.85 inches. So I'm going to set it to 2.85, and because it was perfect, it's going to set it both places. I also have Maintain Aspect Ratio checked. I'm going to click Apply, and now we need to center it up. Again, because this block is centered on our rulers, I can use my Center to Rulers tool to do that. So I'm going to click my alignment icon, and then my Center to Rulers. And now my circle, my artwork circle, is perfectly in the center. And so I've got them both in charcoal, but this one is a run stitch, and this one is my artwork. And what I want to do is I want to create a fill boundary of this circle with a hole in it in the shape of my heart. But I don't want to do it to this artwork. I want to do it to the artwork or the run stitch that's actually going to get created in my trapunto step. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my trapunto now. So I'm going to click on my original artwork of the heart, and I'm going to come up to my trapunto tool, my auto standard trapunto tool, and click it. And that's going to create some more run stitches for me, and it's going to create that tack down stitch. Now in this case I got a bunch of other stuff going on to tack my fabric down, so I actually don't need this extra tack down stitch in here for that fabric. And you can see it comes out into the rest of the design, so I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find it, and it should be this last stitch here, and it's this one right here, and I'm going to delete it by pressing the delete key on my keyboard because I don't need that. And now I actually do not need my original artwork anymore, so I'm going to delete that. Again, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to press delete on my keyboard so we're not distracted by that. And so what we've got here now, let's scroll down our sequence view, is we've got a charcoal stitch that is a run stitch, we've got a slate blue stitch that's a run stitch, and then another charcoal stitch that's a run stitch, and our last piece of artwork here also in charcoal. So what I need to do is I need to create, this is going to be my placement, this is going to be my tack down, this one is going to end up being my visual run stitch around the edge, and this one's going to end up being my boundary. So I need to create a couple of new things. First of all, I'm going to change the color of this artwork to separate it out from here. So let's just pick pink, and I am going to get a copy of this charcoal, and I'm going to do a copy and a paste. And so now I've got this, and I'm going to change it to pink as well, and I'm going to do that by clicking here. And these are now two pink pieces of artwork. Actually, this is not artwork. I need to convert it to artwork. So I'm going to do that with my convert to artwork. So now I've got a heart and a circle, and I'm going to select both of those. I'm going to do that. My last one is selected. I'm going to come up to my top one and select it. by holding down Control key to select them both. And I'm going to come here to my combine icon. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a shape here. I don't know how well you can see that. That's in the shape of the outside circle with a knockout in the shape of my heart. And if I fill it temporarily and I click apply, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So this is what I've got created here right now. And I could go ahead and put in a Trapunto design in here if I wanted to match this, not a Trapunto, rather a Stipple design here if I wanted to match this outside stipple. But we're actually going to put in a texture pattern fill here, and we're going to put one in out here. So why don't we go ahead and do that now. We'll start with the inner one, and my inner one wants to be a texture fill of pattern number 267. I'm going to come down here to my texture fill icon, click it, and I'm going to find 267, which is right here, and I'm going to click that, and that's going to put that pattern in. And again, I've got my original artwork here, which is a little distracting. I really don't need it anymore, so I'm going to delete it. And that's going to give me a nice texture fill with a heart-shaped hole in the center. I've got my stitches that I need to make the Trapunto work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this outside stippling into also a texture fill. So what I'm going to do is find that pattern, and I'm going to have to do that by expanding my light brown color here. And I see this auto stipple here is right here in the center. I'm going to leave my runs alone. I want them to define it. So I'm just going to select it. Then I'm going to come down here to my texture, and I'm going to select 257 and click it. And that's going to put that texture pattern in around the outside. So my block is basically pretty much done at this point, but what I need to do is I need to come in here and make things stitch out in the right order. So you can do this just about any way you want by dragging and dropping things around in the sequence view, but probably the easiest way to approach this is to put all the things that I know I want to stitch out last at the end, and I know that this fill that I've already got selected, I know I want it to be one of the last things. So the easy way to do that is to right click on it and go to the move here and select last. So that's going to move it down to last. And this one also is last, so it's already in the right place or near to last. And then I actually want my outlines to stitch out last. So I've got, I've got this outline around the outside here. I've got this pattern around the inside, and so around the outside of my feathers, and this kind of bordered. I want that to go to the end, so let's go ahead and move that to the last. So I'm going to right click and again go to move and then last, so it'll go down to the last. I've also got a run stitch around my heart, and I want that to stitch out last, so that's this one right here. So I'm going to right click on it and again move it to go to last. Now I'm going to set all of these to be the same color. So what I'm going to do is come up to the top one here and select it. I'm going to come down to the bottom one here, pull down my shift key and select it. That's got all of these. What color it is really doesn't matter. Let's make them a new color. Let's make them wine. So I'm going to click on wine, and that'll make them all stitch out at the end there. And the order that they stitch out really doesn't matter, but let's just go ahead and leave it in the order that I've got there. I've got one more thing I need to stitch out last that I forgot about, and that's this run stitch here. So let's select it. That's actually our feather design, and I'll right click on it and I'll move it to last, and we'll go ahead and make that one also wine by clicking on wine, or I've already got it in my sequence view here, so I'll just select it. Now you'll notice that I've got two wine items here, one at the top and one right here right below it. These will all stitch out in the same color, but it'll actually make the machine stop between these, and I really don't want it to stop. I really don't care. So I am going to right click on the last one here, and I'm going to select remove stop. And what that'll do is remove the color stop and make them all stitch out together. Now my design is almost done. The only thing I've got here is at the top here I've got a slate blue outline, and that's a placement line. And here I've got another slate blue one, and that's actually a tack down, but it could become a placement line because it's the same as this one, which is our actual placement. So it's already blue. So let's go ahead and use this one. This time I'm just going to click and drag it up onto this one, and it's going to fall in right below it. Again, I'm going to right click on it and say remove stop, and that's going to stitch out our placement lines. And then what I want to stitch out is my tack down for, and this is actually artwork here. I don't need this anymore, so I'm actually going to delete it so we're not confused by it. And is this artwork as well? No, that's a run stitch. And where is that run stitch? Let's see where that is. Oh, that's around the outside. I also want that to stitch out at the end. So I'm going to right click on that and say move it to last. And again, I will change it to that wine color, and I will right click on it and remove its stop so it all stitches out together. Now what's the difference between these two? Okay, that one's the inner one, that's one the outer one. Let's just move those together so that they stitch out together. And the last thing I have is these are my two tack downs here, and again they're in the right place, but I want them to stitch out together. So let's select both of them by holding down Control and selecting the second one, and let's give them that charcoal color. So let's click on charcoal, and they're now charcoal. Are they all one item? Let's see. Yes, they are. So now my design is done. Let's slow redraw this and just see how this is going to go. So first thing we're going to do is stitch out both of our placement lines, and then we're going to stitch out our tack down lines. I went through those really fast. I'm sorry about that. And then it's going to stitch out all of our finishing stitches to create the Trapunto design. So all we need to do now is save the block, and that is how you use all the tools. So I want to thank you for watching today. I invite you to come back next month for another edition of Total Quilter Monthly.